It is amazing what the left has done in this country, even in terms of the debate. So now you see they are the warriors against communism. Let me ask you a question. What philosophy is closer to communism, capitalism or socialism? Oh, excuse me, democratic socialism. I keep saying this, so even the backbenchers will repeat it, which is this. Democratic socialism, so-called, taken to its extreme, is what? Taken to its extreme, it's Marxism. Capitalism taken to its extreme is capitalism. Right? Progressivism, the government form, taken to its extreme is Marxism. Constitutional republicanism taken to its extreme is constitutional republicanism. And yet we spend in this country, day in and day out, listening to the promotion of quote-unquote democratic socialism, progressivism, statism, so-called liberalism, whatever nomenclature they give to their ideology. We almost spend no time talking about capitalism and the market system unless you listen to this show. All right, I'll be right back. Did you know that good blood pressure is one of the keys to
877-381-3811.
Professor Paul Kengor, how are you, sir? Grove City University, welcome back.
Hey, Mark, good to be back. Thanks.
All right, listen, we have this article today, Politico, pointing out that this Russian woman is akin to Alger Hiss. Now, this can't be true, can it?
No, I'll tell you, that one really floored me. I mean, it just shows, like you and I were talking about the other day, how people on the left have just gone to hysterical proportions on this. And, I mean, for one thing, I don't even know where to start on this, but first of all, Alger Hiss was an American working for the government, working for the State Department, among other things, and this woman's not an American, right? I mean, she's a Russian, but to give you just one idea, kind of for starters, what Hiss was doing and how this is in no way comparable. I mean, Hiss in the 1930s, and this is what the Hiss-Whittaker-Chambers case became all about. That was a case that went from about 1948 to 1950. But Hiss was a government official. He illegally took classified files from his State Department office. What he would do, Mark, is he would wait till the end of the day when everybody had left and there was maybe a secretary there who trusted him, and he would put the documents in his briefcase, and then he took these documents home and he gave them to his wife, Priscilla. And then Priscilla would type up duplicates of these documents, these classified documents, and then they would be delivered to the Soviets, and then Hiss would bring them back the next morning. And the courier, if you will, who did this was Whittaker-Chambers. And Chambers, who, and this is right out of the biography of Whittaker-Chambers by Sam Tannenhouse, the old New York Times guy who's a liberal and a very good historian, wrote a really good biography of Chambers. But Chambers said under oath that he was a courier for these documents from Hiss, quote, at least 52 times, unquote. And Chambers would take these to a Soviet agent named Boris Bykov, who would then deliver them to the Kremlin. So this Maria Butina, who, I've read what they've said about her, and I'm trying to figure out what exactly she did that was so nefarious. But I can tell you this. She didn't do nearly anything as bad as what Alger Hiss did to his government in the 1930s and 1940s.
It is amazing because even in this Politico article, you don't know what she did. He doesn't tell us what she did, and he really doesn't tell us what Hiss does in any significant way, does he?
No, he really doesn't. I mean, I guess to his credit, he gets a lot of the Hiss sort of basic facts right, but it's kind of what he does with them and where he goes from there that's the problem. But it's off the top of my head, but I think he pointed out that Hiss went to jail for about 4 years, right? I think he was convicted in 1950. He was convicted for perjury. These are the kind of details that are in there. And
where did he perjure himself?
He perjured himself before a jury, a grand jury, and that's in fact what he went to prison for. And probably the only funny thing that Hiss ever said or did was he said that 4 years in a federal prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, was an excellent corrective to 4 years at Harvard. So,
but here's the thing. Hiss was defended almost right to the end by many Democrats and leftists and newspapers in this country.
Oh, yeah. No, it's absolutely right.
They thought he was railroaded.
Yeah, they did. There is an Alger Hiss chair, or at least there used to be at Bard College. I mean, Alger Hiss has been defended by the left from the very beginning, 1940, for decades, and I think it was the late Arthur Schlesinger who was a man on the left, but the so-called, pretty honest liberal, and he even said something to the effect of, "Well, we and all of Alger's friends knew that he was guilty, but we remained as friends anyway." But even then, there's a lot of people on the left that absolutely refuse to admit that he was even guilty. And the New York Times, Washington Post, and others, they tried to downplay what Hiss did at Yalta, suggesting that he was a, quote, mere note taker, a glorified office boy was one of the phrases that they used.
Who was? Let me give you a few names: Harry Dexter White, Lachlan Kerry, Frank Coe. Who are all these people?
Yeah, these were among the many Soviet agents or agents of influence, closet CPUSA members, although Harry Dexter White actually wasn't a Communist Party USA member. And in fact, a real difficult problem with a lot of this, Mark, is trying to separate a Soviet spy from a CPUSA member to an agent of influence. And sometimes the worst thing that you could get would be somebody who would stand before the House Committee on Un-American Activities and truthfully say, no, I'm not a member of a Communist Party, and I never have been, because a lot of those guys didn't join the party because they didn't want to take direct orders from Moscow, and they could help Moscow more as a non-party member.
So who was Harry Dexter White?
So Harry Dexter White was in the Treasury Department. He just major influence on behalf of the Russians and the Kremlin, many different ways, was called to testify for it, I think, in 1946, and pretty much lied through his teeth in that testimony, and then died of a heart attack very, very shortly after that. But he was one among many.
Well, let's go through some quickly before we run out of time.
Yeah.
Lachlan Curry, who was that?
Lachlan Curry, another one. Probably the very worst that I think nobody would dispute today of high-level FDR officials who caused serious problems. Lachlan Curry, Harry Dexter White would be at the top of the list. They were higher ranking than Alger Hiss. Then there was people like Harold Glasser, Lee Pressman, Harry Hopkins. Harry Hopkins is controversial. The Herb Romerstein of the Venona Papers, who died a few years ago, I think you and I both knew him, and he's convinced that Harry Hopkins, who was the single closest aide to both FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt. I mean, the guy actually lived in the White House. But Romerstein is convinced that Harry Hopkins was Agent 19 in the Venona Papers. And some people dispute that. They say, well, he wasn't a spy, but he was definitely a dupe and a useful.
But I want the audience to understand that when they're talking about Trump collusion with Russia, and the best they can do is a phony FISA warrant against Carter Page. And maybe there was a meeting with a woman who was pushing to change the Maginski Act. Or this woman, Futima, whatever the hell she did. It doesn't come anywhere close to what was going on in Franklin Roosevelt's administration, which was over the top with these people.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And to give you an example of this, what exactly Alger Hiss did at Yalta, I mean, Alger Hiss, the spy that we're talking about, was actually at Yalta. And that was the February 1945 final conference that FDR participated in, where they sold out not only Eastern Europe, Poland, but other parts of the globe. And we now have this documentation. This is directly from Edward Stettinius, who was FDR's Secretary of State at the time, actually Secretary of State at the time of Yalta. And this is Stettinius's papers are now at the University of Virginia. Liberal historians, if they really wanted to, could go down there and look through these. Stan Evans and Herb Romerstein and others actually did look through it. But they had all through Stettinius's papers when he's talking about Yalta, quote, Alger Hiss can fill in the background, unquote. This is on German assigning a German occupation zone to France. Another, see Alger Hiss about this. A third, see Alger and we'll discuss this again. Fourth, Hiss would remember, consult him. 5, see Alger Hiss again. 6, see Alger Hiss about this. 7, quote, Alger Hiss can fill in important background on that, unquote. So that all kind of goes beyond the whole issue of glorified office boy or note taker at Yalta. And it also certainly shows that I don't know what Maria Butina did, or actually I know what they're saying that she did. It nowhere even begins to compare to what people like Alger Hiss was doing.
And very quickly, to bring us closer to this decade, although not close enough, Ted Kennedy, you've written about this extensively. And all the media coverage, I mean, he's a fairly contemporary figure, even though he passed some years ago. He's well known to many people listening to this program, young people listening to this program. He was involved in left-wing causes up the wazoo, blocking conservative causes. From a prominent family, the media loved him. They never bring him up with respect to the old Soviet Union and how he worked closely with the Kremlin to try and defeat Ronald Reagan. Just a few minutes on that, if you can, Paul.
Yeah, sure. And let me add one thing very quickly from Harvard's Cold War History Project. This is, they concluded that the Venona papers revealed that more than 350 Americans, including numerous high-level U.S. government officials and scientists working on the Manhattan Project, were spying for Soviet intelligence agencies in the late 1930s and 1940s. Now, that's under FDR. More than 350 Americans spying for Soviet agencies in the 30s and 40s. But yeah, Ted Kennedy, we have a May 14th, 1983 document. It's written by Viktor Chebrikov, the head of the KGB, to Yuri Andropov, the head of the Soviet Union. And the very top of it says, regarding Senator Kennedy's request to the General Secretary of the Communist Party, Yuri Andropov. And they go through there and they talk about a confidential contact made by a liaison, John Tunney, who had been a Democratic senator from California in the 1970s. He was an old law school roommate of Ted Kennedy. He was the conduit for this, and it was an offer by Kennedy to meet with Andropov. It even says in the document, he's willing to fly to Moscow to meet with him directly. He's willing to help Soviet political and military officials come to the United States. Kennedy's willing to help them, introduce them to American media figures. They even named Walter Cronkite and Barbara Walters in the memo. And all of this is set within the context of the dangerous Ronald Reagan, who, as it notes throughout the document, is up for re-election next year. And he's riding high. Reaganomics is working. The economy's soaring. But Kennedy's very troubled by Reagan as a threat to peace. Kennedy says, to the contrary, that Kennedy is very impressed, are the exact words used, with Yuri Andropov. And so this whole Kennedy overture and outreach is set within the context of Reagan's 1984 re-election.
And you hear none of this in the context of what they're accusing Trump of. Russia, 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 Russia. I can't find all the Russia, 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 Russia involving Trump. Can you?
No, and I mean, if you want a smoking gun document, a piece of hard evidence, I mean, what could be stronger than a literal KGB document written by the literal head of the KGB? This isn't somebody who's a staffer for the KGB. So the head of the KGB, Viktor Chebrikov, writing to the head of the Soviet Union, Yuri Andropov, and that document was found by a London Times BBC reporter named Tim Sebastian. It was first reported in the London Times, February 1992. And just a little bit of it was reported. He didn't actually publish the document. I published the document in full in a book in 2006, and then again in another book called Dupes in 2010, where I published both the English and the Russian and
would that make Ted Kennedy a traitor?
Well, I don't know if it makes him a traitor, but it certainly makes him scheming and duplicitous and doing something pretty damn bad that somebody on the left you think would care about.
But John Brennan, the CIA director before the last two CIA directors who worked for Obama, think he'd call Kennedy a traitor? No, because John Brennan, as you point out and others, voted for Gus Hall, the head of the Communist Party United States of America, and he knew all about Gus Hall, didn't he?
Well, and Gus Hall, who was, head of Communist Party USA, his guys in Moscow at that time that John Brennan voted for him would have been Yuri Andropov at the KGB and Leonid Brezhnev as head of the Soviet Union. And this Kennedy stuff, I note the dates on when I published it, because when I first published those documents in a 2006 book, Kennedy lived for, I'd have to look up, I think 2 or 3 years after that. And nobody, and prior to that, 14 years earlier, 1992, was the piece in the London Times. The London Times. I mean, it's a very respectable newspaper.
I've got 1 minute. Any major news outlet interview you about this?
None.
Any today, other than this show?
No, none whatsoever. I've never.
None. They haven't asked you about Ted Kennedy. They haven't asked you about Alger Hiss. They haven't asked you about the Roosevelt administration, have they?
No, because I think they're afraid of what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So when
that is the facts.
That's right. When they know that you have information like this, they ignore you. If I had my facts wrong, they'd probably attack me and nuke it. But
Professor, I'm on a hard break. As always, we love having you, and I very much appreciate your contribution. Keep it up. He's a good friend, Paul Kengor, Grove City. God bless you, my friend. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.